All right, gentlemen, we are talking to Dr. Kathy Koch, who is the best-selling author of Resilient Kids, Raising Them to Embrace Life with Confidence. Welcome, Dr. Kathy. It's good to have you.
I'm excited. Thanks for the invitation.
Hey, anytime we can talk about resilience, right? Is a very, very good topic, not only for our kids, but for us too.
Yes, it's so
Right.
important for parents, for dads,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So I know we're going to talk a lot about today. But I really want to first tackle this topic of how did you even get involved with resilience work?
Very good question. So I've written six books. Resilient Kids is the sixth book. I've written about resiliency in two of my other books. It's always been important to me. It's a very important character quality. It's a very important secure aspect of our security that I trust other people to help me stand back up after I have been knocked down. I can trust myself to overcome the challenges. So I've written about resiliency before, but it was really during the COVID crisis when it became a very significant topic.
Big time.
Because, right, Larry, I'm sure for you too, you saw that kids were defining themselves by what they did not have.
Oh,
They
yeah.
were defining themselves by their losses, and they were significant. Soccer games and piano recitals and proms and graduation, like it was big, and I grieve that. But we can't allow our kids to be defeated and to feel like life is always going to be a life of hard knocks. And so, knowing that parents were also feeling defeated because there were so many things parents could not do for their kids, they wanted to solve all their problems for them, and they couldn't make things happen. So I was watching parents become discouraged. I was watching kids, really the suicide rate going up, depression, anxiety, even increasing more than it had been, and thought resiliency is an answer to at least some of the dilemma. So that was a huge part of my motivation.
Wow. So you started, I mean, obviously you've been doing this work for quite some time, but you really keyed into some of the pressures that we saw with COVID. I'm very curious. I stay away from like, the pandemic and the COVID and politics and stuff like that, because I feel like all people have to do is swipe right for all that kind of news, right? And they come here for something different. But I am curious. I would really love to know your opinion on the ripple effect. If
Mm.
I got to think that there's got to be ripple effect that we saw from, kids being, you know, you got to stay indoors. You can't go to school anymore. Suddenly you become socially isolated. And at those ages, I mean, it's devastating to kids. But over the past, I mean, we're almost 3 years past that now, 3 years past 2020. But what have you seen as a ripple effect?
No, that's a great question. And let me affirm you too. I don't only talk about it when it's essential. I don't want people to blame. In fact, in my book, I think I only mentioned it twice because it's not a topic only relevant to that. So I want to appreciate, your perspective. I also should say, and you know this, that depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies were all increasing prior to the COVID crisis. So I don't want people to think that it's only because of isolation and masking that kids have developed a depressed state. However, that year or more of the confusion and the doubt and losing friends and not being able to see grandpa, and really mom and dad being stressed, dad working in an office, mom possibly working in an office in the same home but not available, schooling over Zoom if they're not homeschooled. I mean, there's so much of that. So ripple effects, doubt, fear about the future. Mommy, will I always have to have a mask in the car just in case? Legitimate question. Academic deficiencies. We've looked at data that so many of our kids are now delayed academically. They'll catch up, I believe. However, the system is difficult. I really ache for administrators and teachers in the system trying to figure that out. Learning to read over Zoom, memorizing math facts over Zoom, really, really hard. So academic deficiencies, I think doubt for the future is huge. And I think relationship. Why should I have another friend? What if it happens again and it just hurts so much? We could talk all day about that. It's a great question to look at.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I have four boys, they're 16, 15, 9, and 6. And, we from a mental state, right? Because my kids were 13 and 11-ish at the time. And I remember, for my older boys, my younger kids, they felt it, I know, but they couldn't really articulate it. And my older boys, especially, it was very, very hard on them. They were right in those middle school years, and it was very, very tough on them. I mean, we tried to be, we actually, and I'm really darn proud of what we did. Um, I think we were 2 months into the pandemic, and we were just like licking our wounds, and we were depressed as a family and
Yeah.
all these different things. And we finally sat together as a family and we're like, all right, we started asking ourselves different questions, which for us, that has helped our resiliency as a family. Instead of like, why can't we do X, Y, and Z? Why can't this happen? Why can't that happen? We asked ourselves different questions, which was, okay, how might we make memories and come together as a family in ways that we never have before, being faced with what we're faced today, and do things that the rest of the world isn't doing.
Excellent.
Yeah. And we did. And what we did was we planned 12 straight weeks. Every Wednesday I took off work and we did an adventure. And there were 2 rules you had to abide by: go do something you've never done, or go see something you haven't seen as a family.
I love that.
Oh man, it was great. And the final thing I'll say about that real quick is that I think resiliency, I think you can really exercise that muscle a little bit by asking yourself more solution-based, better questions. But my wife, just this past year, she put together this giant like mural of almost 100 photos from that summer.
Oh,
And in the middle, it said, turn your can'ts into cans, and your dreams into memories. And it's literally just moments, random candid moments of us on these adventures. And it was so cool. But it's interesting that you include that, because I think that that really tested the resilience of our kids and really tested the resilience of our families through that whole process.
I think that's really cool. At the end of my book, if you don't mind my reading
Yeah,
this,
please.
this is my last thought in the book. Moving from I won't, I can't, I don't know how, I wish I could, I think I might, I think I can, I think I will, I did, I am.
Oh, that's awesome how you connect the dots like that, because it seems like everyone just sort of builds on the next, correct?
Yeah, and it's a
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Resiliency, learning, growing, succeeding. It's all a process moving from I can't do that
Right.
to helping a kid be able to say, no, daddy, look, I did it. And that of course would be the epitome of resiliency, that we don't believe the I can't and we move on. So I love that you and your wife have done that. Your boys will be different because of the optimism that you've expressed. That's really cool. Thanks for that example.
Well, thank you. Yeah, page 171 of the book.
Yeah,
This is incredible. Here's the other
cool.
really cool thing too, is that um, when your kid says, "I think I might," you give like this beautiful next step. It's kind of like this stair step
Yeah,
of what could be the next thing that they could say to themselves. So that's really, really cool.
yeah.
I'd
Thank you.
love, yeah, for sure. I would really love to talk about what is the definition of resilience.
Great place to start. Now that we've set a nice stage, I think I define it in the book as readily recovering from difficulties. It simply is the decision to readily recover. I'm not going to stay down in the valley after I've been discouraged or disappointed. And difficulty can mean anything. Difficulty can be the loss of a grandmother, a cancer diagnosis in a friend, the loss of a favorite toy because it broke, not earning an A on a test, but it's readily recovering from difficulties. I used to define it as bouncing back from difficulties, like Tigger and Winnie the Pooh. But I figured out, Larry, that's not terribly realistic. And it's not necessary that we bounce back. You just have to come back to readily recover. It starts as a choice where your child falls down when learning how to walk and stands back up. Your child, has a really negative soccer practice, but goes back to practice next Saturday. So they recover readily. It's a choice that becomes a part of their character when they have enough experience with it. So one of the goals that I have for dads is to not overprotect your kids, guide them and guard them and be available to them. Obviously, that's your responsibility to provide and protect in that way, but to allow them enough suffering that they figure out how to navigate life, because life comes with the knockdown experience. Resiliency, readily recovering, choosing to not stay down. Ideally, it becomes a part of character.
I have a question for you about not staying in the valley and making that choice. So being readily recover from the valley, as you stated. We've all been there, and
Yes, sir.
a lot of times it feels like this domino effect of like, okay, all these dominoes just fell. I'm literally at the place where the last domino fell, and I feel like I just can't crawl out of this hole. In fact, like pushing all these dominoes back here, or getting out of this valley, that choice. Sometimes I think the hardest part of the entire process is making that choice where someone can literally just sort of talk themselves out or ask themselves a different question or do something different. But what do you suggest as the very first step to be like, all right, enough's enough. Here we go.
The first thing that comes to mind might surprise people, and that is that your kids have to believe that they are people of worth or nothing matters. So if I believe I'm a person of worth, not better than anyone else, but created by an intentional God on purpose, with purpose, for a purpose, and there are gifts within me and things that I can accomplish, then I'm not going to be willing to stay down in the valley. So young people, children, adults who are knocked down, who give up on friends because friendship is hard, who give up on academics because they had a really hard class or a hard teacher, give up on piano because one year was tough. They have to believe that they matter enough to strive for something new. So how do we teach our boys and our girls, again, that they have value and therefore learning matters and life matters? That's the first thing.
So how do we instill that they are a person of worth? Because that's got to be, if someone doesn't believe that, like, I would think that's a huge missing piece, and maybe even a missing piece that's hard for us to guide someone to get into that mindset.
That's certainly true. And that's why you and I do what we do, because we know it matters. If you're a born again believer in the Lord Jesus Christ, you read the word of God looking for those golden nuggets. Psalm 139, 13 and 14, that we're created fearfully and wonderfully made. Genesis that declares that we're created in his image, male and female. There's other verses that would capture the essence of God's intentional design. Ephesians 2:10, you were created in advance to do good work, that you would walk in them, to give kids hope that in the future they will know that. One of my quick examples, I'm tall, I'm 6'1". When I was a young child, I thought I was too tall. And I would say, Mommy, Daddy, I'm too tall. And they enrolled me in tap dance class, and I became the center of the back row, a position of high honor that only the tallest girl was allowed to have. And now my height is one of my greatest advantages. When I speak, which is what I do, I'm an author and a public speaker by profession, I can be on the same level floor as my audience and sit on a stool because of my bad back and still be seen, because God knew what he was doing when he chose in his love to make me me. And the same thing is true for everyone who's listening to us and everyone who's not listening to us. I used to say I'm too tall. Now I just say I'm tall, right? There's a difference. So our language matters. The scripture will heal the hurt and inspire the kids, and telling them stories about your lives and how when you were little, you didn't get it either, but you're so glad you lived long enough to find out why you are who you are. To be not just pro-life, but pro-living. Like that's what you and your wife were pro-living during those difficult weeks where you said, we're not going to just sit at home and stay in the dark and twiddle our thumbs and stay isolated. We're going to go and do something that's going to change us and maybe even the world around us. So giving kids opportunity to serve and to grow and to learn and to communicate and to commit, all those things matter greatly to all the things we're talking about today.
Wow. So, and as far as like, and let's just kind of wrap this up with the best way to show our kids that, I mean, obviously we do it through example.
Yeah.
But if we have a kid, that perhaps they're just really, really down on themselves or something's going on, or they're just like, man. And I think a lot of us parents, we get really hamstringed in like, man, what do I say to this? Because I believe in this kid, right? I believe in this kid with everything that they have, but I can't get them to see it. So how do we get them to see it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Two things come to mind. One is to really hang out because you like them. Kids tell me on a regular basis, my mom and dad love me. They don't have a choice. I wish they liked me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, seriously. Is that profound?
Yeah.
And then when I say, well, what would your dad do that would cause you to know that he likes you? And the typical answer is something like, he would suggest shooting hoops and not always make me be the one to suggest it. He would come find me in my room and ask if we could play a game together. He would say, hey, I'm going to run over to, Lowe's. Do you want to go with me? That's Kathy. I don't want to always be the one to initiate contact with my dad. So when you act like you like them and you sincerely do, and I know there are days when you don't like them and you're like, what were you thinking, God, to give me this kid? Like, I get that. It's not easy. But to walk toward them and be interested in what they're interested in. Not just it's about you and what you're interested in, but to say, why do you like that band? Why is that the game you love to play so much? Tell me about what it makes you feel inside. Tell me about one of your friendships and why have you chosen that guy to sit with in youth group. So talk about their stuff, I think is hugely important. Yeah. And the other thing I'll say, Larry, and I think this will make sense, provide the evidence. When we say, I believe in you, provide the evidence. In fact, in my book, I talk about something called toxic positivity. If a child is struggling and we just say, you can do it, it doesn't allow them to feel their pain. And if we don't feel their pain, they don't care what our solutions are. They have to know that our heart will connect. It's a little bit harder for guys to do that than for the women to do that. But to connect your heart with them and don't be afraid of their pain. And to say, oh, Samantha, I'm so sorry that that happened to you today. Or Jake, getting cut from the team, that's frustrating. Let's talk about that. So share that pain with them. And when you do say something like, I know you can do it, why do you know they can do it? What's the evidence? Hey, this paper today that you're so afraid of, look at how similar it is to yesterday's. Now, wait a second. Last soccer season was really rough. You were the youngest on the team. You're a year older, and this is the team you're playing with now. They're 7, 8, and 9, and you're an 8-year-old. You're not going to be the youngest on the team. And I've been watching the main coach for your team. He's been doing this a long time. And I'm going to be with you. We can do this. So evidence doesn't lie. I know you can read this well because is such a powerful word. Because it forces you as the dad to provide the evidence, and evidence doesn't lie. Now it's not just my daddy has to say that he's my dad, but you've provided truth that they can observe and rely on, and that'll change everything.
I love that. I had another podcast guest who shared something similar, which is give the evidence and also link it to a characteristic trait that your family believes is like a core value. So like, for instance, my 9-year-old opened a door for these ladies going into Starbucks the other day. And I was like, dude, that was so kind of you. I was like, displaying a characteristic like kindness, generosity, it's so important. And I thought it was amazing that you did that. It was so kind and generous of you. And I think when we do that, point things out very, very specifically, like you mentioned, it goes so much further than like, oh, that was cool. Nice job. Right. Because it's
exactly
so general, right.
Yeah. I call those cheerleader compliments. Like when we say, great job, fabulous, man, I love the way you cleaned your room. Those are cheerleader compliments, and they have a place in the enthusiasm and encouragement of your home. And when we say, thanks for being kind, and I noticed that you were polite, I noticed that you were patient with your sister, identity is gained from the words that we speak over our children. The more specific, the better. Absolutely important, providing the evidence for that. Resilience is a word to use with our kids. If you want them to readily recover and you want them to not stay down in the valleys, then we need to say things like, Jake, I love that you're learning to be resilient. What's that, Daddy? I saw that something was hard for you, but you didn't give up and you tried it a different way and you made it work. And I'm so proud of you for being resilient. Identity controls behavior. It's one of the things that we teach here at the ministry. Who I think I am is who I will be. So the next morning, your child is struggling with something and says, wait a second, Daddy said I'm resilient. Daddy says I'm really good at solving problems. I bet I can figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he begins believing in himself. And then he says, Daddy, look what I did. And eventually he'll do it and not even need your praise because it's become a part of who he is.
It's luckily I'm on this side of the microphone. So I've been doing this for 8 years. So I get to be the one who gets to be taught by you guys who are so fantastic and you're experts in your field like this. So I've gotten to learn a lot of these things. So I want to share a quick story with you that I think will really hit this home.
Cool.
My 16-year-old and my 15-year-old both wrestle. They were in a wrestling tournament 2 weeks ago. My 16-year-old, wrestling comes a little bit harder to him, but he absolutely loves it. So it's funny because he plays in the marching band. So he identifies as like a band kid. And he is also on the wrestling team. He's the only kid. I was like, it's fascinating. We were talking about this for almost like 45 minutes last night. I was like, Ethan, this is so fascinating. I was like, because you're merging two worlds that never come together, right? In high school, like the band kids are looking at you like, oh my God, that's Ethan who plays saxophone, but he also wrestles the 138 weight class. Like, whoa. And then the wrestling team is like, wow, Ethan also can wrestle, but he plays saxophone in the band. Like it almost like helps them almost look at the whole ball of wax just a little bit differently, which I think is kind of cool. But Ethan,
absolutely,
he's a very resilient kid when it comes to stuff like this. But like, so we were in this tournament. He lost his first 2 matches, won his third, came back and had a fourth match. And this kid he was up against was an absolute monster. And this
Ooh.
kid just threw him around like a sack of potatoes, almost like you're watching it, or like you feel a little disturbed watching your kid just get roughhoused. And I was like, oh my gosh, he's really getting his rear end handed to him. Came back on this fifth match, and I was like, he had to have mentally broke after that last one. Came back and pinned the guy.
Fabulous.
I know. I was just like, so he comes off the thing. We're talking on the way home, and I was like, actually, it wasn't even on the way home. It was later that night. I was like, you know what? I was like, do you know what my favorite part of the entire day was? He's like, me winning. I was like, yeah, that was cool. I was like, but let me be more specific here. I was like, yes, you won that third match. I was like, but here's where I thought you did something most people don't. I was like, that fourth match that was hard. It was even hard for me to watch. It had to be hard for you. He was like, that was a tough one. I was like, most people would throw in the towel and they'd be done with their day. And they knew they had another match, but they're like, whatever. After that, I'm done. I was like, I really want to know, what did you say to yourself? How did you recover? Because you came back like you never had that loss at all and pin your last match. I was like, how did that happen? I was like, that showed so much grit, so much resiliency in the face of what most people would be like, last match anyway, don't have a lot of energy, lost the last one pretty bad, whatever, I'll get the next one. But you didn't. And he explained to me what was going through his mind. But picking out something very specific like that was, I think, turn that into a game-changing conversation for both of us.
Yes, I love that you did that. We should never assume that our kids even know the value of what just happened. They don't necessarily. We know the value because we've lived longer and we have expectations for their tomorrows. So to be present to your kids, like I love that about you, and to get your son engaged in a conversation that was positive and optimistic. And I don't think it's inappropriate to say life changing. The next time that he's in a situation, whether it's on the mat or somewhere else, and he's in thinking of giving up, he might remember, wait a second, Dad said, I don't give up easily. So why would I give up now?
Yeah.
Words, the words we speak and the words we don't speak change lives.
Yeah.
We have to be really, really cognizant of that. Yeah, way to go. That's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I just, that story emerged as you were taking us through that. And I just wanted to share it, but allowing our kids to struggle, I know that's another topic. And, that's a hard one for us. And I would say it's hard because it's hard for a parent to watch their kids struggle, but I think we don't know what that silver lining is, right? Of like, okay, I'm going to make you struggle, right? It's going to be unbearable. Right. Or it's like, oh no, I'm not going to make you struggle at all. Your life will be perfectly comfortable at all times. Like I still don't know where that balance is, but maybe you could help us with that one.
That's I love the way you said that. Yeah, I don't want anyone to, think that we're talking about horrific struggles that are, life damaging. Certainly rescue your children from things that are really overwhelming and age, inappropriate. However, if we rescue too soon, bubble wrap, hover over our kids, we correct their mistakes when they haven't even finished making them, they'll feel weak. They'll feel like we don't trust them. And the reality is that they won't grow and become who they could have been. And that's not my opinion. The scripture teaches us that it's in the victory that we get our success and we get our commitment, if you will. So Romans 5, as one example, would teach that when we endure, we develop character, and through the character, we develop hope. And when I ask people, whether they be young adults or parents in an audience, even teenagers, and I'll say, how many of you have a greater Christ-like character because of struggles that God has allowed you to walk through? And without thinking, almost every hand goes up. It's almost instant. And then I'll say, how many of you trust the God of the Bible more because you've seen him show up in your valley experiences? Every hand goes up. And then when I say, how many of you value greatly the things that you've had to struggle to achieve? Every hand goes up. So we know that, right, Larry? We know that intellectually. And yet when we're in the throes of our 8-year-old is weeping and our 10-year-old is talking back at us and our 14-year-old is discouraged, we're tempted to go in and fix it. Like, I get that, because you don't want to see your kids really struggling. And yet for us to think of the long-term benefit, and even to have that conversation with our kids to say, I love you too much to rescue you too quickly. What, Dad? I love you too much to rescue you all the time. Because if I do that, you won't believe in yourself. You'll be weak. You'll always depend upon me, and I'm not always going to be with you. So I want you to learn from the challenges. And I have a family that recently read my book, and mom and dad and two kids. And this mom and dad took seriously what I write about, the benefit of the struggle. And they started making a list in their home of the benefit of the struggle. And they have their kids have written down things like, I did not like practicing the same piano piece so many times last night. I was so bored. But today I really liked my teacher's compliment. I'm so glad she was happy. And she said I get to play it in the recital. So now I'm happy. Write that down so that that's what we remember, not the pain in the moment, but the victory, at the end of the tunnel, if you will. Really, really important. Don't overprotect your kids.
So be more mindful of the results that can come through the struggle. Is that really what I'm hearing?
That's one thing. And then I'll elaborate. Yes, that's the exact summary. Be mindful of the benefit. And that might motivate you to keep your mouth shut. Or I even say in my book, leave the room if you have to. Like if you're afraid you're going to overprotect or overcorrect before they have a chance to learn, leave the room if they're going to be safe in there. I think that's important. And there was something else I was going to say. It'll come back to me if it's important.
Let me ask you this. I think I did something wrong. So this is a story where I think I might have overstepped, right? And didn't maybe allow my kid to struggle enough. So my 9-year-old in school, he loves math, loves numbers, all that good stuff. Right now he's going through like reading comprehension as well. So he reads, or he has to create something just writing, right? And God bless him. I read him this book called Eli's Lemonade Stand. And he had to, so we talked about, being this of this entrepreneur mind, right? And solving problems and creating businesses and that kind of thing. He's just 9. And so he told me, this was the night before the quarter ended, which was just last week. And he's like, hey dad, he's like, I got to tell you something. He's like, I'm really behind on this writing project. And I was like, well, what writing project is it? He's like, in 9th, he's in 3rd grade. I'm like, what kind of writing project is it? He's like, I got to write this, this thing, like, and he couldn't really explain. He's like, I got to write this thing. It's got to be 5 paragraphs long. And I'm really behind. I was like, well, how far are you? He's like, I'm at 1 paragraph. It's due tomorrow. I was like, okay. I was like, okay. I was like, all right. I was like, well, what do you think needs to happen? And he's like, I don't know. And he's 9. And I'm like, okay, well, do you think you can get it done? And then I go back to page 171, right? And he started off with, let me take a look here. He started off with, I can't. He also started off with, I don't know how. So that's where he was, like the first 3, right? Yeah. So I finally got him to the point where I think I got him to the I think I can the night before. And I said, okay, so we're at the I think I can. And the next day I said, hey, what if I took you to school and I talked to your teacher? That was me kind of like trying to be like the rescue a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to download with her where he was at, what's needed and that kind of thing. And I also incentivized him too. I'm like, look, it sounds like this is a tall order. I was like, it's a big project and it's due today. It's the last day of the quarter. I was like, so if you get it done, we'll grab some ice cream for dessert after dinner tonight. Mm-hmm. So he knew ice cream was on the line. So I talked to his teacher. Here's the funny thing about the typical public school system too, right? So she's like, yeah, she goes, he needs to write a few more paragraphs. She's like, I don't really agree with the topic he's writing about because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I think he needs to write about something. I was like, well, what is he writing about? Because he didn't tell me. She's like, he's writing about creating an ice cream shop that has way more flavors. So people, when they walk in, they can decide on several different flavors and not just the typical, 15 or whatever at a normal place. I'm like, I think that's a great topic. That's his entrepreneurial business mind going. I was like, right. I'd love to see what he creates. Yeah. She's like, okay, well, I'll create him some space today so he can work on it and, give him some nudges to get it done. So he got it done. But I don't know if I overstepped there. I don't know if I'm like, okay, let me go in and talk to your teacher for you. Or if I should just maybe let him fall flat on his face. I don't know.
Thanks for sharing that, because I bet there's a lot of guys who can relate to that. Your son. So my gut is that you did what you knew in the moment your son needed you to do. I often recommend that we ask children if they want us to be their advocate in that moment. Would you like me to go talk with your teacher with you? It's good if they can listen on to that discussion. And you might have said, no, I've got it. I'm going to do it, Dad. Then you might have said, well, how are you going to are you going to go ask for more time? Then you problem solve with him. I don't think that you did something terrible, especially because it was the last day. What I would also hope you would say then is, son, let's not ever have this happen again.
Good point.
If you're overwhelmed by an assignment that's due and you don't understand how to make that happen, you need to let the teacher know that because it sounds to me, Larry, like she didn't give enough guidance. That's a lot for 9-year-olds. So how do you do that step by step, right? How do you think of the topic? How do you divide it out into what could be 5 paragraphs, or at least come to your mom or me and let us help you? So I think as long as there's that teachable moment, let's not let this happen again. I think it's great. And as far as the motivation of ice cream, occasionally I think that's okay. I wrote a whole book called Start with the Heart, which is about motivation. And there's a place for a treat and there's a place for a surprise. Bribery, like that, if you do it, I'll give you ice cream, can actually weaken a kid's belief in self, because then he says, oh, daddy doesn't think I can do it, so he has to offer me ice cream. So we don't want to overdo it. What you did, I think, is fine. You were kind of in a desperate situation. And my gut is that you needed him to find out he could do it. He's 9. It would not have been good at the end of the quarter for him to find out, I can't write. You don't want that to be his identity. So your motivation was pure there. What he needs to understand is that that's not always going to be the case.
Yeah.
Why? Because you've proven to us you can do it. Now it's a matter of time management and planning.
So one more question on this, because I think that this is a miss, I think, for me, and maybe even for some of the dads listening, right? So that was on Friday. You and I it's Monday, we're recording. I would really like to capture this situation with him and have a conversation with him around it. So, and I know you mentioned like, hey, let's not ever get in this situation again, but is there a way that you would guide me to have a conversation with him now where we could pick out some of the gems that came out of that and also pick out some of the things of like, hey, let's not let this happen again? How would you do that?
I might wait until it was graded and returned. And then you would have, the teacher's opinion is this, do you agree or disagree? Why or why not? And yeah, you just start like, what did you learn from this? And make a list. Kids, when we write it down, they know we're taking it seriously. So what did you learn from it? And maybe he says 3 things. And could I tell you what I learned from it? I need to make sure I ask on a more regular basis if you have anything that's frustrating you or hanging over your head.
Right.
Because you know what I bet? I bet if I would have asked you, is there anything that you're concerned about in school? Maybe that would have made it easier for you to tell me before the night before it was due. So I'm going to commit to you to do this. And what are you going to commit to do back to me? I'm going to pay more attention and figure out where I'm frustrated, and so I can ask for help from either you or the teacher. So I think that's a good conversation. And kids like to talk in the dark. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, Larry, but kids tell me on a regular basis that if it's going to be a hard conversation where there might be embarrassment, or they might feel shame, or they might hurt your heart, they don't want to look into your eyes. Kids tell me, I don't want to see daddy's eyes if I'm going to hurt him or scare him. So the dark is really good for them. Or go for a car ride because they can't make extended eye contact with you, or go walk the aisles of a store, or go clean out the garage together. Boys always, you probably know this since you're raising 4 boys, but you might not know the contrast. Boys always talk more when they're busy.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so do grown men.
Yeah, no,
Right?
totally. I've talked to women who go out for a date with their guy and they have nothing to talk about. But if they would have been shopping, they would have talked the whole night. So girls, if you're raising daughters, they can often handle what I would call the kitchen table interrogation. If you want to get your boys to be honest and vulnerable with you, play a game together and they'll start to talk, or look at a bunch of games in the game closet and find 5 that you're going to give away because you guys don't play them anymore. And in the midst of that, he'll start to say, hey, Dad, this thing happened at school. So in the middle of that, he'll start to be vulnerable. So yeah, look for opportunities to have those discussions. There's 2 chapters in the book about conversations, because if we're not available to our kids' heartache and concern, we can't help them become resilient. So I love what you're talking about.
So true. For my teenage boys, my 16 and 15-year-old, I've noticed 2 words allow Pandora's box to open of conversation, and that's ping pong.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Because
Cool.
we have this, we just got this ping pong table. I bought it for the family for Christmas. And what I've noticed is some of the most lighthearted, fun conversations and deep issues that might be concerning them are happening as we hit that ball back and forth. And it's been great. Or it's the gateway into that conversation where we let our
Yeah.
guard down, we have some fun, and then we can talk about whatever. So yeah, that is a true statement for both young men and grown men for sure.
Mhm.
I love taking them to do some sort of activity, or yeah, to increase the environment of psychological safety, be side by side,
Yes.
not nose to nose, toes to toes, as we call it.
Right.
But I love that. And that's right. And I'm gonna take your advice and have that conversation with my 9-year-old. So thank you.
I love it. Thank you for
Yeah.
asking.
Core. And so I know the other thing too, the role of optimism. I know that that's a topic we're going to talk about. I personally can't stand like, oh, the universe is filled with, sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns and all that. Like, I just think positive and everything will be okay. Right.
Yeah.
I can't really stand that whole belief system. But what is that balance of
Yeah.
optimism, but maybe not, hey, let's be realistic as well.
Yeah, totally. No, it's such a good point. It has to be a realistic optimism, which is why I talk about what's the proof and what's the evidence. You can't just say, hey, you can do it. But the joke story I tell, Larry, is that I could not have been a jockey on a horse. I'm 6'1". So I could have prayed every night, Father God, make me short. And I wake up every day angry at God and angry at my parents for not helping me discover a realistic dream. So optimism has to be rooted in truth and has to be rooted in who we know our kids to be. And if we feel like they're dreaming a dream that can't be met, we better step into that. If we allow our kids to be, thinking I just talked to some parents the other day who have a 16-year-old son who believes he's going to be in the NFL. And he has actually said to his mom over and over again, I can't wait until I can buy you even a bigger house when I'm in the NFL. He's an average player as a 16-year-old high school kid. It's not happening unless the Lord strikes. And so how do you have that conversation where you have to say, son, let's look at some proof and let's look at some evidence. And then how do we turn the corner to something that might be realistic, like coaching or physical therapy or being a ref or doing something with the sport of football, but not being a football player. So optimism, a positive belief that's based in reality, coupled with positive experiences. So optimism is proven to be true. I can be optimistic because the last time I faced something similar, I did this was the result. I feel better about myself and math and my teacher. So I think all will be well. And this is where kids don't always see the connect the dots, where we can do that for them in conversation, even in a little mini lecture at the table if we need to say, son, we're really concerned that, I can't do it. I can't do it. You turn the page and you don't even look at the page and you say, I can't do it. Like, that's not how we're raising you. We don't want you to have that belief about learning or yourself. And so, let's talk about what is true. Optimism. It's extremely important. Kids who are not optimistic blame themselves always, and they don't, well, that's not true. Kids who are pessimistic will often blame themselves when somebody else could have been blamed. Okay. They don't take credit for success. You need your kids to take credit for success. Now, not instead of God. God is the one who equips and empowers and instills, and the Holy Spirit guides and leads. Absolutely. However, if you have your child who studies, asks for help, clarifies confusion, earns a good grade or a spot on a team or on a wrestling team, then you want that kid to be able to go, I did cause some of this to happen. Why? Because I'm a diligent, obedient, submissive, healthy kid, and praise God. And now I can have more positive belief in myself. Does that make sense?
It does. I want to dig a little deeper on this. So like options that are proven with truth. Is that what I'm getting at here? That's the role of optimism. So how to have that conversation and be optimistic. So it's really twofold as I'm talking out loud, right? There's optimism of like, hey, we need to be realistic about some things here. As far as like, let's use the example of my 15-year-old loves football. And I would say he's, if I were to like zoom out, he's probably in the top maybe 25% of the kids on the team, right? He is not the star player, right? And he's definitely not warming the bench. He's out there for the whole game.
Okay.
But he's diehard about like wanting to make it to the NFL. He wants a college scholarship. And I think this college scholarship is realistic. But I also know the percentages of kids who make it to the professional level is like less than 1%. But I'm not gonna say that to him and say, like, hey, your chances of making it are pretty much nothing. So maybe you should scrap that idea. But do you think a way to have a conversation with him is, hey, listen, I think your dream to be in the NFL is absolutely doable if we're doing the right things, right?
Mm,
Realistically, you know, the chances of you make it are and for anybody, not just you, are less than 1%. So in order for you to do that, we need to put some pretty profound and strict parameters in place of, you know, what you're going to be doing in season, what type of
yep.
coaching you're going to get on the outside, that kind of thing. Am I tracking correctly?
Exactly. And then he has to decide if it's worth it to him. Like if he were to really
Okay.
find out that it might mean he can't wrestle because he could injure his shoulder and it would distract him from the type of weightlifting that's appropriate for football. Or he finds out if it was the one that was in the band, you can't march in the band anymore because of the competition of time and values. And so then that's when some kids will go, whoa, I like football, but it's not worth giving up the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, again, what's the evidence and why is that the dream? Make sure that for kids, it's not money, popularity, prestige, position. What is it about football? And are there some other things that could be the backup plan if football doesn't happen? And I agree that you don't necessarily need to, burst a bubble if you feel like there's some realism there. Or what I might do is say, hey, let's concentrate on winning the regional championship next year in football. Let's concentrate on you making it to the state championship when you're a senior, and then let's pray that there is a Division I team that comes calling. What would it take for that? Like NFL is, that's pretty far away, right? What are the steps that are going to have to be in place for that to even be a possibility? And the other thing to talk to kids about, and this is what can get hard, and it's so relevant, is there's so much that's out of our control, right? There's certain things he does have control over, but he might have a goal of winning a state championship, and every kid on the team and the coaches might have the same goal, and it still might not happen. Because guess what? There's a team across town that has the same goal and might have different, athletes and different money even to spend, et cetera, et cetera. So helping kids understand what they are responsible for and what they can control and do your very best there under the Lord. And then the things that you can't control. This is where we have grace, mercy, and resilience. Like I didn't know it was going to be a rainy, muddy day, and we haven't had a lot of games in the mud. So of course we slipped and we didn't play as well. There's so much out of our control.
Yeah. This is so cool. I wish I would have
Good.
found you in my first 10 podcasts. Not gonna lie. Would have helped me
Well, I'm
so much.
honored. I'm honored to hear you say that. I'm enjoying our conversation.
Me too. You know, we've talked a lot about boys and we've talked a lot about football and wrestling. I'd really love to key into these resilient lessons and conversations for a dad to have with his daughter. Do the rules change? Do the same rules apply? Or how do we maybe tweak the conversation where it feels good for both her and him?
That's a great question. It's even more important that you react to her emotions well.
Okay.
You need to let her know in your ways that you feel her pain. Girls and women, many will wear their emotions on their sleeve more readily than guys. And so if your daughter is crying, that a lot of typical dads will, oh, no, it'll be okay. Because the tears make you uncomfortable. And I understand that men are wired differently from women, and there's nothing wrong with that. So for you to pray yourself up to enter her room when you know she's had a really bad experience with a boyfriend or with a drama coach or whatever, to just sit in the suffering. Oh my goodness, Larry, to just sit and be quiet. It's so hard, right? But the scripture, what is it? Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Really important for girls that you respond in the high end of the rejoicing, high five, and hey, you want to call grandma? And, boy, tell me more about how you feel. Like, let her talk about her feelings. Even if you think they're irrelevant, they're not. So important. And then if I could dare say, color with her, and coloring is not male or female. I'm just using that as an example. Go to her tea party. Seriously, how many dads do I know who did the tea party when their daughters were 3, 4, and 5 years old and loved it? Little girl was 5. She wore her princess outfit. She invited daddy to tea and he went and he pretended to drink tea from a teacup and it was great. Now, when they're 8 and when they're 17, those tea parties change. Right
They
now,
totally
now she wants to go walk Hobby Lobby aisles with you or fill in the blank, whatever might be going on. She wants to go to a painting class. So ideally, You continue to walk toward her and be the hero. She needs you to be the hero, provide and protect, listen longer, be quiet, let her talk, and let her know, yeah, that you believe. Yeah, I think, I love your question. There are differences. Those are the ones that matter to me. I think the ones that I would state, the ones that come to my mind first.
Makes perfect sense. We teach a marriage masterclass. One of the skills that we teach is using tactical empathy with using things like emotional labeling and words like "tell me more" versus "why do you feel that way?"
Yes.
Or accusatory. So like, for one of the things and this, by the way, is not even my content. This is, we learned this from Chris Voss, who used to be the chief hostage negotiator for the FBI. But he talks about this very thing, right? Of, before we even get to what he talks about, let's talk about what's going on with the mind with men. Your daughter is hurting, right? And usually when a female, especially our daughter or our wives or whatever, or kids too, right? But at the same time, the reason men want to fix it is because we so badly just want to take away your pain. Like,
yes.
we think that's providing, right? Is provide. I want to provide you the solution so you don't have to feel this way anymore. I want to take that pain away. And the huge miss is that exactly what you just said is just being able to sit in the discomfort of it with them, right? Label the emotion. Like, I always like to give men just a little bit of a map. So if it's your daughter, maybe she just got cut from the drama club, she didn't get the lead role, and be like, man, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Who would not be frustrated with that? Tell me what's going on. Yeah. Right. I mean, that is much more, that's a 10x level of service for your daughter versus like, well, let me just take you out for ice cream and I'm going to tell you how to get over this whole thing.
If she stuffs it, she's not going to be better off because it'll come back later. So I'm so proud of you for teaching that. I teach that men don't have emotional vocabulary like women do. Men have as many feelings, but men tend to not have as much vocabulary. So a girl or a woman can be frustrated, angry, ticked off, jealous, disappointed, and just done. And guys are angry. That's like a safe male emotion. So one of the best things for a man to do who's raising daughters is up your vocabulary. And so I have, in some of my books, I have actually an appendix of emotional vocabulary words so that you are able to understand that what your daughter is showing you, and even what a boy is showing you, might not be anger. And anger is never the first emotion. Anger is always caused by something.
Right.
So what did she lose? Was she embarrassed? Did she fight hard and it didn't seem to matter? So she's mad at herself. Frustrated is a good word, etc. No, I love that, to really try to enter into that. Yeah, so you are providing by feeling and letting her be seen, and she'll trust you. So if your daughter trusts you with her heart, you have everything you need. You talk about providing and protecting, come on. That it takes work, but we can do that. We can do that.
Yeah, seen, heard, and safe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question for you, just built up as you're talking about this. Let's take a teenage daughter or a preteen, and let's say we're trying to be empathetic, comfort, resilience, kind of like literally the whole package, right? But she's like, and she gives us this one: Dad, stop. You wouldn't understand even if I explained it to you. Right. So guys are just like, okay. Yeah. So how do we take that situation and maybe bridge it into something that could be more productive?
Yeah. Way to ask a tough question. But I love that. I think, to be honest, is very important. So it might be appropriate, depending upon the age and the stage, it might be appropriate to say, based on how I've behaved before, you're probably right. Or I can understand why you would say that. I'm a 43-year-old guy. I've never had the experience you just had, but I desperately want to understand because I love you so much that I need to understand your heart. So please trust me. So that kind of a reaction might be appropriate. Another suggestion I would make is, if you have had positive inroads, point those out to her. she's in a moment of great defeat, and she's not remembering that just a week ago you were really supportive of her. So if there's truth that you do understand her and you have been able to rescue her from confusion with a boyfriend or with a science teacher or fill in the blank, then either right then or later you stop by and say, hey, I was praying and thinking, and I'm remembering, a week or so ago when we talked about, the Spanish thing that you had to do and how it was embarrassing. And I feel like we really made some progress in that discussion. So I want to encourage you to don't give up on me. Work with me. And I'll say one more thing. The written word is very powerful. We don't lie as often in print as we do face to face. When we write a note, the disadvantage of writing a note is that she can always throw it in your face, like, look what you said. But to write her a note and say, hey, Angela, I understand why you said that you didn't think I would understand. I get that. I was hurt because I don't want you to think that that's true of me, but I understand. But I love you. And here are some things I've noticed. Am I getting close? Love, Dad. Write back or come talk. 12 hours or less, like give a limit. The note is not instead of a conversation, but it's to stimulate one. A lot of kids tell me that they feel ambushed. They feel like, we've done all this thinking and all this production up in our head, and then we spew it all over them. So maybe taking some space and writing a little note, maybe putting it on a pillow. She finds it at bedtime, or she finds it when she gets home from school the next day. And some kids will write you back because it allows us to think clearly without an emotional response that we're triggered with. And then you have a dialogue that's been started. So that might work for some people.
I really, really like that. That is just so cool, because I think what you're doing is you're lobbing out the invite of like, hey, I've been thinking about you. You've been on my mind. And I would love to welcome another conversation,
Yes.
in this time frame, right? But and then it gives that kid, you're putting that kid now in charge, or that daughter especially, in charge of like, hey, the door is open. I would really love for you to step through it.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. I think it's one of the ways that we can show great value in the child and in our relationship. What I would recommend further, Larry, let's say that you drop that off in your child's bedroom at 8:00 at night. For the next hour or so, be available. Like, try to be in the den looking like you have nothing to do, so that if she decides that she immediately wants to take you up on it, she's not coming in and seeing that you're watching, some important football game, or you're in the throes of, your banking website. See if you can wait until she's in bed to do some of that. She might wait 24 hours, but try to stay available right then and there in case she walks around kind of checking you out.
Great advice. That is
Thank
great
you.
advice. This is brilliant. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're so kind.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you so much for coming on. This is a godsend. As we wrap up here, I wanted to make sure before we give the audience ways to connect with you and ways to obviously go buy your books and that kind of thing. Is there anything that we're missing that you wanted to cover that we didn't?
Oh my goodness. We had a fun conversation. So maybe I'll say this, Larry, related to all that we're talking about. Let's make sure we model it as best as we can.
Yeah.
Right. So you want your kids to not be overcome by defeat. Make sure you don't appear to be. What do you say at the dinner table if you messed up something at work? Do you complain only about your boss, and does it appear like you don't take any personal responsibility? If your kids catch you and your wife talking, do they hear enthusiasm and vulnerability, and do they see that you care about her heart? So the things that we've been talking about with our sons and daughters, let's make sure that we're doing the best that we can to model that behavior in the home and outside of the home. How do they see us interact with our pastor? Do we sit under his authority with legitimacy, and are we curious and thoughtful about that? Because hypocrisy doesn't work, and you know that. They are watching and they are listening, and so the better that we can align all that, the better, right?
So good. So good. Thank you so much for coming on, Dr. Kathy. Gentlemen, like I said, we're talking to Dr. Kathy Koch, the best-selling author of Resilient Kids, Raising Them to Embrace Life with Confidence. Before we head out of here, I would just love for you to share. I know you said you have an arsenal of other books, but what are your other books so the other men know?
Let's see. Screens and Teens, which is about how technology changes our beliefs and behaviors. Start with the Heart, which is a book about motivation and character development. No More Perfect Kids, which I wrote with Jill Savage, which is about raise the kids you were given, not the kids you wish you had. 5 to Thrive, which is how to make sure that their core needs are met in healthy ways. And of course, Resilient Kids that we were just talking about, and 8th Grade Smarts, how kids are smart in 8 different ways, which is actually my bestseller, how to make sure that we teach to their entire brain. And all of that is available at our website, celebratekids.com, or at your most common online retailer, if you want to just put it that way. And of course, we're on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a newsletter and we have a podcast. So I would love for people to check us out.
Heck
And I
yeah.
should maybe mention too, my last name is spelled Koch. So if you do search for me, it's Kathy Koch, Koch, or just go to celebratekids.com.
Awesome. We got you covered, guys. Not to worry. Head on over to thedadedge.com/408. Make it easy for you. We'll have a list of all of Dr. Kathy's books, her social media, as well as her website, ways for you to sign up for her newsletter. Obviously, she knows what she's talking about. She gave us gold on this podcast. So you're welcome. And I appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for coming on. This was just what I needed as well, personally and selfishly. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for trusting me.
Me too. Gentlemen, like I said, head on over to thedadedge.com/408 for this show. You'll also find in there our full focus presence training that's brand new. It's free. So you can actually take these skills and be fully focused, engaged in the moment, engaged in the conversation, have conversational excellence with your kids, and be there 100%. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.